So let me give you a real quick introduction because we've got some really cool guests. I think you'll have a great time. So I was in the hub on a Friday. It was probably several months ago, and one of the officers that serve the church, and by the way, can we give all the officers that serve our church a great round of applause? Very happy that they're here. I was out there and, I started talking to him and he was telling me what he did, and he's sort of like over the tactical parts of stuff. So like when it gets really bad, he's the guy that trains people how to deal with the really bad stuff. And so I said, hey, listen, this can be off record if you want, just an officer to a pastor. But I look around the world, I see all the shootings, the violence, all the stuff. Any thoughts? Just, you don't like, if you don't want this to go anywhere else, I'll keep it here. He's like, no, he goes, I definitely have some thoughts. He said, I think that one of the biggest reasons why we have so many of the problems that we have in our country today is because of the breakdown of the family. And it's just the truth. And when you do a series like this, there's always some landmines, and I want to be upfront because I don't want you to hear what I'm not saying. If you've gone through a divorce and you're here and you're going, oh man, they're going to talk about how the families ought to stay together and it didn't happen for me. Can I tell you, the name of our church is not Guilt Community Church, okay? It's Grace Community Church. So don't hear what we're not saying. If you're single, you can't go, okay, I'm going to another church for 4 weeks because this doesn't. No, we got something to say for you too. But what I want to say is I passionately, is the pastor of this church, want to make sure that we are creating safe place for families, for kids, and for marriages where you can be authentic. I grew up oftentimes, and it was like the people that they would bring up and explain what a marriage looked like. I'm like going, there's nobody in the world that lives that way. It's almost too good to be true. And so you're going to find that we're going to be real and vulnerable. I decided that since we live in such a crazy time, that if I talked about marriage, there'd be somewhere between 40 and 50% of the people that wouldn't agree with me and be mad. So I said, why don't I just bring in some other people? They can be mad at them and they can still love me as their pastor. So that's what, I'm from Kentucky. That's the way we think. But no, I didn't do that for that reason. But what I've done is I've selected different couples from different parts of our country at different stages in their lives to come in here and just simply vulnerably and authentically share about their marriage. And I'm hoping that as we do this, that at some point in your life, whether it's today or next week or the following week, whenever, there'll be some intersections of what go on here on this platform into your life that will help you. And then the last thing I want to say is that when we're done with the series, we have been spending time as a church working with other couples to get them trained to be marriage mentors. And so if you have a need, when we get done with the series, we're going to be able to give you couples that are further seasons along that can help you in your marriage, because I do want the marriages at Grace to be solid and committed and strong, and to grow up children that love Jesus and love the house of God, so that we can buck this trend that's going on in the world, and we can say, hey, God's still faithful to his church and still faithful to marriage. So that being said, we got a really cool couple. They're flying in from Denver, Colorado. Jon McCray is what you would consider to be sort of a YouTube sensation. He has a channel called What Do You Meme? And many of these have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of views. And he's known, very well in the apologetic world, cultural commentary world. Works oftentimes with Frank Turek. Everybody enjoy Frank Turek last weekend. So him and his wife Kara are here, and I just want to make sure that we give a huge, warm welcome to Jon and Kara McCray. Can you give them big applause as they come out? Come on, man. I just want to stand here in between people that look good so I can look good once in my life. So anyway, my kids are always like, Daddy, you have no swag at all. I don't at all. I wear the same shoes, I think, every weekend. And I've got people that are like, they text me, Pastor Chip, I'll be happy to polish your shoes because they look terrible. And I'm like, I ain't trying to impress anybody by the way I dress at all. So you're my friend because you like me, not because of the way I dress, right? So, but you all look great. Anyway, will you take a second and just introduce yourself to the wonderful people here at Grace and just tell us just a little bit about yourself. Start with you, Kara.
Hi, I'm Kara. I'm Jon's wife. I am a stay-at-home mom of 3 boys. We have a 7-year-old, super sensitive and sweet, a very wild 3-year-old, and a fresh, new, calm 2.5-month-old baby.
Yeah. And Jon McCray, obviously, I'm Kara's husband. And like he said, I run a YouTube channel called What Do You Mean? And I spent a lot of time in the past studying a lot of apologetics and theology and philosophy, and eventually landed on doing a lot of cultural stuff for YouTube. So that's what I do.
Yeah, and you would really avail yourself of checking out Jon. He's very balanced in the way he handles all kinds of stuff. So check that out. So let's get to work here. One of the things that you see in American culture is this sort of just lack of commitment at times. And I'm not saying there's no commitment, but it just seems that there's a lack of commitment. What are some things in your marriage as believers has God shown you and taught you about just the fact of working together and staying committed? Anything you want to chime in on that? And because I'm sure there's people out here that are struggling, trying to figure out how to make things work, and you all are incredibly honest and vulnerable. Talk a little bit about just the strains of marriage and what it means to be committed and how God's worked with you in those types of situations.
Absolutely. Yeah, so when it comes to commitment, I think in culture today, a lot of us think about like commitment in the marriage, kind of like other kind of commitments where we're okay to be committed to something as long as we're, happy and we're satisfied, kind of like the relationship you have with like, your car salesman or a mechanic or something like that, right? And so people take that kind of same mindset into marriage. And I think one thing that we learned early on in marriage is that the commitment in Christian marriage is different than that, right? Because the commitment is not based on how happy you are. You aren't making a commitment to be happy with the other person forever, but instead you're making a commitment in order to serve and love the other person forever. So that's a big difference, and that's one of the things I think we learned really kind of early on, because commitment to a lot of people sounds like, it's going to kill all your freedom and it's just going to be awful, right? But I think that kind of mental adjustment for us was really big early on in marriage.
Yeah. I think when we went into this, we didn't expect it to be so hard.
Yeah.
And when you do have these really hard arguments and fights, it's just easier to say, well, you're not making me happy, so it's just easier to get out of this. And we had to stay focused on the foundation of the commitment that we made to each other, to God, to love one another through each other's flaws. And it's not easy at all, but when you set aside those feelings and take the action to love and be more forgiving, it gets easier as you do it. And we're still learning, but...
What I've loved in talking with you all for all the services we've done is you've been incredibly vulnerable about your marriage, and I just want to say here at Grace, we have to create spaces where husbands and wives can come in here and say, hey, we're challenged right now in our marriage, without getting that holy, righteous response of, oh, we'll just go pray and go talk to God about it, and it'll work. And I mean, no, if you're in here today and you're watching online and you're going through some difficulties, I want you to know that, hey, we're going to talk about real issues. And maybe some of the religious people here at Grace are going to get a little offended. Oh, they're talking about fighting. Come on, give me a break. Nobody doesn't fight in a marriage, and if you don't fight, somebody's not being authentic. I used to say to people when I don't counsel anybody anymore for marriage. People do that, but when I used to counsel people for marriage, I would say to them, when's the last time you fought? And if they said, we never fight, I'm like, I won't counsel you till you come back and you fought. You think I'm joking? I'm being for real. I'm like, just go ahead and go. I'm not going to marry you until you fought. I need you to fight. They're like, what are you talking about? No, I need you to fight because you're going to fight. And if you don't know how to fight, it's going to be a problem. Talk about fighting as Christians. Tell me how God has helped you, what he's taught you, what he's shown you in the interactions that you all have had where you've had those struggles.
Yeah. Yeah, learning how to fight well is definitely one of those things that you're going to keep learning. I mean, at least for us, we just keep learning and learning. I mean, we'll fight over like toilet paper, how
Very
the toilet
petty
paper should go.
stuff.
Because, for
Let's
example,
talk
we have
about
different
that. We need to
perspectives,
probe
right?
that, the fighting on toilet paper. I'm kidding.
We have different perspectives where, like, she sees the toilet paper I like as too thin, and I see the toilet paper she likes as too rough. So it's different perspectives. But really, I think for us, one thing too is like in the Bible, there's a Greek word for love. It's agape love, and that love is not. The love is actually self-sacrificial and it's commitment and action-based. And so this was a radical kind of shift in our thinking because we primarily saw love how culture kind of sees it is like a feeling of some sort, right? Where you say, well, as long as I feel this way and you're making me happy, then I'm going to stay with you. You know what I mean? But so it was kind of like, in other words, this was a big thing for us because we realized that like how God loves us. He came and he was self-sacrificial for us. Jesus died on the cross for us, even though we didn't deserve it. It's an unmerited gift that he gives us through his grace. And so taking that same kind of mindset and thinking, if I could be forgiven for all of the things that, you know, God's forgiven me for, then, and even though I don't deserve forgiveness, then I can extend that same kind of grace and love to her as well. And so we really kind of practiced that a lot too, which has really kind of helped us grow.
Yeah, and I think that he tells us to be this way towards one another because it's good for us, even though we don't feel like it in the moment. I mean, I know there were times where I'm like, this is too hard. I shouldn't admit that I was wrong first or whatever. But when we are loving and forgiving, it's good for us, and it shows in our marriage and makes us love each other more.
What is the power in a Christian couple that can be the first one to say, I'm wrong?
Yeah. That's the thing too, because you'll find that in marriages too, and a lot of my friends and stuff will talk about this, and they say the same thing. They say like, he's like, man, I'm always the one saying I'm sorry. She never apologizes and stuff like that too, you know. And I think it's one of those things where if you're waiting for the apology all the time, you're gonna get bitter, right? You know, and so we try to forgive even before we feel it, you know what I mean? You forgive before you have the feeling of forgiveness, you know, and then that really helps so you don't have these expectations about getting something back all the time, you know? So what we've learned is that like we're, at least I'll speak for me, I'll say, I'm incredibly self-centered at times, right? Incredibly self-centered without even realizing it. I'll just be—
Is that true?
Yeah. But so I'll be thinking, I'll say, well, what am I getting? I deserve this, you know? So she should be apologizing to me, and I did this for her, so she should be doing this for me, you know, those sorts of things. And I realized that type of thinking is kind of opposite of how we're supposed to love our spouse biblically. Because when we love our spouse biblically, we're thinking, how can I serve you instead of being what it is that I'm getting? And instead we're thinking, how can I give? And that was a really big turning point for us as well, too. It's kind of that mind shift and spending that time together talking about these things, too. Yeah.
Carrie, you said in the car back and forth, and you said it a couple other times that we've done this, that one of the biggest changers for you being married was truly understanding the gospel. Can you explain that to maybe somebody who's out there going, I don't understand what that means?
The gospel changed our marriage, and now I don't see how you can get through a marriage without it. When I really understood that I'm a very sinful, awful person, and Jesus loves me, aside from all that, and we made a commitment to God to love one another and model that behavior, though we can't do it all the time, but to model that behavior to each other, that changed everything for us.
What would you, so somebody who's here who's maybe not a believer, or maybe somebody's watching online, not a believer, and they're going, yeah, I don't really believe that Jesus can make a difference in a marriage. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think that Christianity does offer, it has these resources that it can offer that I think really do assist in marriage. Because I believe that the kind of cancer of marriage is that self-centered I focus, you know, that we all have a tendency for. All of us can, we keep thinking about ourselves. In Christianity, if we look to God and what God has done for us, then it makes it easier for us to tap out of that too. And so there's a lot of biblical principles, even like how we talked about with love and stuff. These type of principles, I think, make marriage a lot easier, because if you're living for just happiness, if you're chasing happiness and you're saying, I'm staying married and, to be happy, then you're going to have times where you don't feel happy. You're just going to have those times, right? And so if that's what you're chasing, you're less likely to get it, because you're chasing that happiness and you're going to be disappointed. But I think for Christian marriage, when we realize that the commitment is bigger, and it's not just between us, but it also goes up to God as well too, that really does provide those resources that I think can make a marriage a lot more stable, because she doesn't need to get all of her validation from me, and likewise, because we know that we're accepted and loved because of what Christ has done for us.
So let's talk about another subject that I think people would be interested in hearing. Explain, as a Christian, being married in an interracial relationship. How's that played out? What have been some things you've had struggles? Just speak into that to us.
Yeah, we have actually faced a lot of obstacles when it comes to being in an interracial relationship and marriage, especially in the beginning. I mean, there were people that were very important in our lives that were not going to be anymore, and weren't for 2 years. And in my Bible study, my women's Bible study, we prayed the same prayer over and over again for some specific people for 2 years, and you get to a point where you're kind of like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to accept that these people are not going to be in my life anymore, because we were going to be together. And it was, people try to say, oh, that's not Christian. I mean, just it was really hard. But I went to Tennessee, where I'm from, and I asked God to give me the words to say, because I had a lot of anger and was really emotional about it. But I went in instead with forgiveness and said, I forgive everything that you've said, and I would just love to have you in my life. It doesn't matter the past. And praise God that these people that were very stuck in their ways for many, many years, were in tears saying, will you forgive me, and I'll spend my life making it up to you, and actually supported us in our wedding. And that was God's work, to really work hate out of people's heart like that. And if we didn't have that focus to go into it with forgiveness, I don't think anything would have changed.
Yeah, it was really tough at the beginning, because I knew that, especially like a lot of people that she really were really important to her, like just refused to talk to her. You know what I mean? They were telling her, they're like, you either pick him or you pick us, And so that was hard, because I knew how important they were to her, And so so it was a tough thing to kind of get through, but we learned a lot through it. We stayed together, and we never really held bitterness towards them or anything like that, because it's back to kind of forgiveness. And I kind of figured, I was like, yeah, they just don't really know me. They figured I was probably like their worst nightmare from a rap video or something that they saw on TV. So it was okay. It was okay for me. I was like, oh, they just don't understand. But
Okay, so for our singles that are out there that are going, yeah, I'm going to go to another church for 3 weeks. What can you say to them? They're single. They're listening to this. Some of them probably want to get married. Some of them may be single. Maybe they were married. What can we say to the singles that are here at Grace? What would you say to them, as a guy, as a girl? What would you say, hey, these are some things that I think you need to know being single?
You want me to go? Yeah. So I would say, when I think about this kind of question, if I understand you right, when I think about this, I just kind of think about, there's a passage in Philippians 4, the passage people know, where it says, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. The context there, Paul's talking about, he knows what it's like to be hungry. He knows what it's like to be well-fed. He knows what it's like to be really poor. He knows what it's like to have money. And through all these things, he's okay, because he knows that in Christ, he'll have his strength, right? And so I think that that's my kind of first thought, is like, I know what it's like, if you're single, and especially being a single Christian is hard, because, you're trying to be pure and try to stay pure for marriage and stuff, and it's tough, But I think that if we kind of start from that aspect where we realize wherever we're at, we trust God in that moment and know that, God is with us, and how can we glorify God in this moment, and what can we learn about ourselves, that sort of thing. And if we seek his righteousness first, then all of these other things will be added on to us. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take I want to, do you want to throw something on my singles?
Oh, no.
You good? Okay. I want to move to kids, because 30 minutes goes fast. We were talking. We were like, this just goes fast.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember being 19 years old in a restaurant, watching a family with a kid, throwing a tantrum, throwing food on the floor, going, that will never happen when I'm married and I have kids? Remember that? And then 10 years later, you were in the restaurant with your kids, and another 19-year-old was going, that will never happen ever. And the reality is, I don't know about you all, but all of our 6 kids were born at Sarasota Memorial Hospital. Maybe you did get one. We didn't get an instruction manual with any of the kids. And you all are right in the throes of kids. 7, 3, and 2.5 months.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Thank God for one-stop flights from Denver, right?
Oh,
Yes.
amen.
So nonstop, not one-stop, nonstop flights. So here's what I want to say, and then I'm going to let them talk into this, is that, when we're raising kids, I want you to know, as the pastor of the church, and I say this regularly, my kids fight. My kids wipe boogers on each other. My kids try to drown each other in the pool. They call it baptism. I call it waterboarding. And so, you have that going on. And I want to create a community where people go, yeah, raising kids is not easy. There's these books that say, if you'll do this devotion and read this thing and do this, your kids will just turn out perfect. We have a word in Kentucky. It's called bull. And so what I want you to hear is the honesty of where they're at with their kids. And what I'm hoping is somebody in here gets a get out of jail free card with your kids, because it is a ongoing thing trying to get our kids to grow up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And we do it at home. We try to help here at the church, but we want to create a safe place. Talk a little bit about your kids, because you keep saying you all don't know exactly what you're doing either. Nobody does, but I love the vulnerability. What are some things you've learned? Somebody in here goes, whoa, my kids are crazy. What have you learned that helps some of that as Christian parents?
Well, because it's hard. Our boys have energy all the time, and they love to jump and yell and all that. And being a stay-at-home mom and taking care of the house and, helping with his YouTube channel, and it's a lot. And sometimes I have to just put everything aside and spend quality time with our kids. And when we do, their behavior changes a lot. But we talk every day, and I think it helps that when we're on the same page and we come to them and talk to them together is really helpful.
Yeah, no, kids, that's, you guys, if anybody cracks the code on that one, please come share it with us, right? Because the kids for us is hard. And they seem like they get harder too, for some reason. It's like, we're like, they were good last year, what happened, And so we spend time talking a lot too, but what we kind of realize is they're all 3 of them are different. Our little one, he sleeps a lot, but the other 2, they're real different, and they're complete opposites. And so we realized that, like, what's that? Oh, I thought you said something.
No, I was just listening.
Gotcha, yeah. So what we realized is, like, our older one, he really appreciates quality time, right? So we realized, like, when I spend a lot of time with him, I make sure we go on walks every day, and then we hang out and stuff after, because doing that, we realize his behavior is just a lot better, So he really needs that in order to stay kind of grounded, that a lot of quality time. And our middle one he's a little independent terror, he's the wild one, and he always he just likes to fight, so he likes to beat up our older one and stuff, and our older one's crying and stuff, so so he likes to fight, but we realized like with him, if I wrestle with him and like to just, kind of be more physical and stuff, like do physical stuff in games, he's better as well too, So realize making these adjustments, but we're not going to sit up here and act like we have that one figured out, because honestly, it's really hard, sometimes. And so, like especially if they're fighting and stuff, we're like, these kids won't stop fighting, So anyways, yeah, that's what we work through, and we just keep trying to make adjustments, and we talk and stuff. But there's a lot of days where we throw our hands up in the air and like, we can't figure this out.
Yeah,
Take
we
the
try
wheel,
to
right?
remind.
Yeah.
Jesus, just take the wheel.
Yeah.
I joke with my closest friends, Mindy she's an incredible mom. She just is fantastic. She leaves, and I have the kids, and I joke with my closest friends. I'm like, so she leaves, we read books, we watch a movie, we play hide and seek, we swim, we jump on the trampoline, and then 5 minutes is done, and I don't know what to do, at all. And my kids are liars. Like they I don't bathe them every night, and when I do, they're like, oh no. Mommy lets the entire bathtub get full with bubbles. Now I ain't that dumb. I'm like, yeah, that ain't happening. They do. They're terrorists. They take after their mom. They'll just. But what I want you to know is this. In families who know me know this. There's been kids that run through the church and they're like, oh no, we're sorry, Pastor Chip. I'm like, let them run. They're like, why? I'm like, I want the kids at Grace to love to come to church. I want them to love it. Because we need to keep them in church. But that doesn't mean, I know some of y'all are older, oh my gosh, it's the house of the Lord, don't let the kids run. I get where you're coming from. I want you to know that it's an epidemic that kids leaving church, especially when they get to college age. You know that as an apologist. And we just want to do what we can. Like, I want you to know that you have a team here, a church here, people here that understand that marriage is tough, understand that raising kids is tough, understand that being a family is tough. And, we at the end of this series, you're going to have people available. We've been training people. We're going to have mentors available for married couples, that you can get people that are a season or two ahead of you in life and get with them. They've been trained to do this, because we're making an all-out effort here at Grace to make sure our families succeed and our kids succeed. If you had each of you, this is like you're leaving, you'll be back in Colorado sometime next week. There's people here, there's people online. If there's one thing you could say is sort of like the final thought to people here, and it could be about marriage, it could be about kids, it could be about single, whatever you want to say, what would you say to the people of Grace sort of as your final little thing to leave with?
I would go back to and being a Christian and having the same foundation, being on the same page with the same goals, and understanding the gospel and how awful we are, but that we're to model the same love. That changed everything for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And
gave us motivation when it's hard, in those moments when it is hard too. You don't want to be that way. And when you take the action, it really shows, and it makes marriage better.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I'd say there will be times, I think, for everybody, I'd hope, unless we're weird, but there will be times where it seems impossible, you know what I mean? And it seems like you just can't communicate. You just can't get the other one to understand, and vice versa. You're just missing each other, And so I think a big thing is to kind of, for me, I think laying aside the things that I consider to be the most important things to me personally, the things that I wanted out of marriage, be willing to lay those things down. You know what I mean? Because there's some times where I was thinking like, me being honest and straightforward, my authenticity was always something that was very important to me. But sometimes I can use my authenticity to hurt her, you know what I mean? Because I'll just be too honest, you know what I mean, in ways. And so I realized like my authentic nature and the things that's most important to me sometimes is my sinful nature, you know what I mean? And things that shouldn't be expressed all the time, And so me having to let go of some of these things that were the most important thing to me for the sake of loving her well, was a thing that I think was something that was really hard, but it was something that I think is probably one of the most necessary things that we had to go through, is that dying to yourself, just how Christ came as a servant, not to be served, but to serve, but that dying to yourself, being willing to lay aside those things that are the most important to you for the most significant relationship that we have, except for God, of course. But
And when you all are doing that, you're better, aren't you?
that's
Yes.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like the things you're looking for, you really find. It's like Jesus is true when he says if you put him first,
Yes.
his kingdom, his righteousness, all the other things will come. It's like when we do it his way, it sort of works. It doesn't make it easy,
That's right.
but it just sort of works.
Absolutely.
Will you thank them for being as honest and vulnerable as they were? I just decided a long time ago as a pastor that, we're not here to entertain people. We're not here to, just make people happy all the time. We're here to really equip and be honest. And, marriage it can be a struggle. And I just want you to know here at Grace that we value those things. We value family, we value kids, and we want to be a church that helps you get through. And I think back of my growing up, I'm 51. I can't ever remember hearing, other than like a seminar where somebody came in, I can't ever remember a church taking weekends out to do stuff like this. And I know some of you may be like, well, we wanted to hear preaching, or we wanted to hear whatever. Let me tell you something. The church needs to spend some time talking about marriage, family, and kids, and we're just gonna do it. So, that's what we're gonna do. So, I want to say a prayer, and then we'll sing one final song. Let's, if you could bow your heads and hearts with me, let's pray.